Hi, welcome to the zoo, and we're your hosts, Caitlin.
And Josh Zaniga.
All right, I'm so excited. We have a guest on today, our very first guest, Kelsi. Welcome to the pod.
I'm happy to be here. I feel honored to be the first guest and nervous.
No, you shouldn't be nervous. It's going to be fun. We're just going to chat and hang out. I always want to call you like Kelsi Carma because that's your middle name, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's my middle name. But a lot of people think it's my last name.
Okay. Yeah, but now it's Horton, right? Is your okay. Mm-hmm. But just so people can find you on Instagram, you're Kelsi Carma, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you're on TikTok too, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm trying to remember how we even met. We were just kind of talking about it. I think we just maybe had mutual friends and just connected maybe through Instagram.
In college or something.
Yeah, in college. I'm like, it's been a while, but we've kind of just, I don't know, I've followed you, I guess, ever since and stay in touch. So it's just fun to see your life. Like, even though I haven't seen you in so long, it feels like just seeing a friend again. I don't know. It's fun. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about you, because I know you've had some changes, like big changes in the last little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, just where you live and kind of what you've been up to.
So we live in southern Utah. We were living in Draper for a while, or Sandy area. Mm-hmm. And my husband joined the Army about a year and a half ago. And he has a long training pipeline ahead. So I knew that when we started this, I wanted to be closer to family.
Yeah.
So we moved down to southern Utah because my parents are there and my in-laws are there. So
that
I
makes sense.
Wasn't sure about being alone with 2 kids.
No, that's a lot.
Family,
yeah. Because we were in Washington and I just recently moved back to Utah and it was the same thing. I really wanted to be by my family because we're going to have a second kid too. And I'm like, I just don't know how it's going to go. I'm like,
totally.
Yeah. And then I can't even imagine just being kind of more solo parenting and everything. So how often does he come back?
It kind of depends on the school. So some of them have breaks between and some of them don't. And some of them, like, they make them take leave. And if you're newer, you don't have a lot of leave saved up. Like, he could come home at Christmas. It's kind of different for every school. Okay. So one of them was like 22 weeks and we didn't see each other. And most of that we could only talk once a week. It was kind of crazy.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
That's intense.
It was so intense. And it was really hard just because it was all new to us.
Well, yeah, you're so used to talking every single day and seeing him too. Yeah. So, yeah.
So that was a big adjustment. But we've seen each other, I don't know, like 5 times maybe in the last year.
Wow.
So to us, I'm like so grateful for all those times because there's been a couple of them that were unexpected. So we've gotten to see each other more than we thought. It's definitely a different lifestyle.
Because how old are your kids?
So Ronan just turned 3 in May and Remy will be 2 in October.
Okay. So they're really close in age.
Yes.
Do they get along?
At first, it was definitely an adjustment for Ro. Just when you're the only child and then there's a new baby, I think it was hard for him. And he was so young that he didn't completely understand.
Yeah, exactly. Since they're so close in age too.
They're definitely more friends now. Yeah. And they play together and it's fun. So it's fun to see them grow up and come into being friends.
Yeah. I'm sure it just takes time. I'm so excited, like seeing you, because we're going to have a girl next and boy and a girl.
I'm so excited.
And I'm like, oh, just so cute. I mean, but yeah, it's like you can't bank on them being best friends always, you know, because you're just like, I don't know, their personalities are so different. And then Noah's so used to being an only child too. So I'm like, it'll just be interesting to see how he does. But
and I think they just naturally like come together.
Yeah. They're like, this is
like she wants to be so much like him. So they're like following each other around and it's fun.
So how did you and your husband meet? I forget your story.
So it's kind of funny. We had some mutual friends. There was a couple and they were just friends of mine and her boyfriend had gone on a mission and come home and then he was kind of waiting for her and she went on a mission.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Kind of different.
Yeah. That's cool though.
Yeah. And I would just kind of check in to see how they were doing and if she was home yet. And, you know, you're just interested, like, are they going to stay together? It's a long time to wait.
Totally.
Especially if you've already gone on a mission and come home. I had like gone and checked and seen if she was home yet. And I was going through like some pictures because I was like, oh, I know some of these people. And I saw a tagged picture, and the first photo was my husband. It was like a selfie. And he just seemed so different. I don't know how to explain it, but I had dated for a long time, and I was kind of over all of it. And I was like, you know, I have nothing to lose. He seemed different, and I could just tell that he seemed, I don't know, really kind and like Christ-like in his eyes, and it was just really intriguing to me.
Yeah.
So I actually DM'd him on Instagram.
Yes.
And
love it.
It's so funny and not very traditional. And he's like not a social media person at all. So he like thought it was a joke.
Is he still not into social media?
No, not really. Yeah. Like he'll post here and there, but it's like once or twice a year. Like, here's an update.
He thinks it's a joke. He's like, is this a collaboration for...
He was like showing his friends and like, do you think this is real? Like, is this a catfish?
Is she a bot?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And so they were like, well, if like, let's find out. Just if she wants to hang out, tell her like, come over right now.
Oh, okay.
So that day like didn't work. So I think I went over the next day or two. And he was surprised that I showed up.
Oh, yeah. You're like, actually, yeah, I'm real.
So we didn't really go on like a real first date when we first met because he just wasn't expecting it. But we sat and talked for probably like 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
That's cool.
And people are like, are you sure? Like, I'm like, no, we literally sat and talked about just everything. And I feel like I knew from that first day that we would probably end up together.
Oh.
Just because our conversation was just so good and so different from other people I had dated before.
Yeah, it sounds like it was more substantial and like good banter back and forth. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Because we felt like that too when we on our first date, me and Josh, like we got along pretty good from the get-go, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I do feel like I was more like pedal to the metal than you were at first, whereas you kind of made me work for it.
Yeah, because Josh actually slid into my DMs first.
I love that.
But then like later on, I was kind of like you, where once I decided I liked him, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to go for it, you know? Yeah. And I asked him to be exclusive and he was like, oh, whoa, like, okay. But I kind of love when girls are more, I don't know, the one that kind of goes for stuff, there. You know? Yeah. Because I'm like, we know what we want too. You know, we don't have to be scared. Just be confident. And then look, it, you know, ended up obviously working out too for you guys. So that's amazing. Branson, did he grow up in Utah as well?
So he grew up in Vegas till I think the end of middle school.
Oh, okay.
And then he went to Alta.
Oh, nice.
Sandy. Yeah.
Okay, so he ended up moving to Utah after that. Yeah. Okay. Does he ever miss Vegas or not really?
I think he misses parts of it just because it's different there. I think he enjoyed having a different kind of culture with the gospel.
Yes.
I don't know.
You mean kind of like growing up outside of the bubble?
Yeah. I know that he definitely appreciated that when he did come here, that he had experienced a little bit more diversity, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because Josh is actually from Washington State. So how did you feel coming from like outside of the bubble, being LDS and then coming in? Like, do you ever miss it or did it not bother you really?
You know, at the time as a teenager, it was honestly kind of apathetic to all of it. I didn't really care one way or the other.
You're just used to it, yeah.
I mean, I just wasn't really thinking about it like that, you know? I wasn't really super intense in my gospel thoughts anyways. Yeah. But I would say that I never looked at like the Utah bubble as like a negative thing. I was always kind of intrigued by it. It's like, oh, it's like a whole bunch of people that think kind of similarly to how me and my family do. I thought it was intriguing. I don't know. Who's to know? I'm probably like rebellious enough where it may have bothered me if I grew up in the bubble. I could see that having happened.
Yeah, because I think it depends on the person, how they handle, I don't know, just being around a lot of LDS people or not. Because it's like easier to kind of go with the crowd. And I think just from what I've heard, people living outside of Utah, just easier to kind of stand out and be like, no, this is what I do, you know? And so that's cool though. I was just in Vegas and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. It's so hot. But I know St. George, because you're living in St. George right now, right? And like, how has that been for you, I guess, living more like in Sandy comparatively? Because I feel like St. George is a lot smaller. Because I lived in Cedar City.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and Cedar City is even smaller than St. George, so.
I've enjoyed it. It's interesting to go back home after you've been away for so long. It's growing so much. Yeah. But I really love it down there. There's finally a lot more to do, a lot more places to eat.
I love that.
But it's busy.
That's good.
It's busier than it was when I was growing up.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was saying to Josh when we were just there for my cousin's wedding. I was like, they have so many more restaurants, I feel like, and it's still pretty kid friendly too.
Yeah.
And which is really nice for you having young kids. So is your oldest in preschool or not yet?
So we planned or thought we were going to move sometime in the fall. And so I didn't sign him up.
Oh, move up here?
No, to North Carolina.
Oh.
So that's like probably something you don't know.
Okay.
So yeah, as soon as my husband's done with this next part of training, we'll probably be moving out there. So he can
that's
finish.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I just hadn't planned on it. So we've just been doing kind of preschool stuff at home, and I'll probably send him next year.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But yeah.
So will it be this year that you'll move, or it's still up in the air?
It's a little bit up in the air. As long as he makes it through at the end of October, we'll know a little bit more.
Okay.
So we're hoping we move soon-ish after. But sometimes they'll tell you, like you have 3 or 4 months to get here or.
Yeah. So we just did a road trip last year to the Carolinas, and I had never been, and it was so fun.
Yeah.
Josh and I both really loved it.
Yeah, we fell in love with the Carolinas. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's
really hot
beautiful.
and humid, but we liked it.
Yeah, it's like a different vibe, but it's so pretty in a different way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just so, I don't know, in love with the like vegetation and the trees. Because Josh would always show me pictures of like what's the trees that you like? They're called?
You mean like the Spanish moss?
Yeah, the Spanish moss. Yeah. And then just the beaches there, like you said, are just a different vibe than any other beach I've ever been to. And then we went to a couple of the places like where The Notebook was filmed. And I think that was South Carolina, maybe.
Yeah, it was in Charleston.
Yeah. And it's some of the plantations. And anyway, it was just like lots of history and really fun. So that will be cool if you guys end up there. I think there's a chance we might end up in the South too, because there's a lot of bugs and Josh is in pest control.
I love
that.
So yeah,
maybe we'll be there with you eventually.
Be neighbors.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Kind of veering into like a different course or different topic. Social media. Caitlin knows more than I do. Like I said, I kind of run passenger princess on this. I just bring controversial opinions to the podcast. When it comes to your social media, do you feel like you have like a niche? Or what would you say it is?
I started out doing more fashion, probably like right out of college or right out of high school into my college years. And modeling, that's kind of how I started out. And then as I got married and became a mom, I've kind of transitioned into more of a lifestyle and mom account, still with some fashion, but just like, I don't know, an all-encompassing like what our life is like and what I wear and
so lots of outfits of the day.
Yeah. Yes.
And get
outfits
ready with
of the day all the time. I am a little bit basic in that way, but that's okay.
No, it's fun.
No, it's totally a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to kind of incorporate like a little bit of my religion in that way, just because I feel like as a mom and wanting to be like part of trends, it's sometimes hard. So I don't know.
Do you feel like you've experienced any pushback at all when you've kind of hinted about your religion?
Up until probably the last year, no. I feel like I have a pretty supportive audience, and most of my audience, I would say, are members.
Yeah.
But I feel like recently, every now and then I get like a few comments that are like, I can tell you're not wearing your garments. Or like, why do you like feel like you can share? You know what I mean? Like some people are just so pessimistic, and I'm like, hey, we're all just doing our best.
Yeah, I know.
I think the garments comment is so inappropriate. It's like,
Totally.
First of all, like if we're just being really candid, it's a covenant between you and God. It's not a covenant between all of Instagram and you and God.
Yeah.
You know? So it's such a personal thing that it's really nobody's business.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's it's not like it's any of their, it's not any of their business. But that's interesting. How has it been like growing your audience? Because I know from what Caitlin's told me, it's grown.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting monster. Over the years, I feel like I grew early on. I think kind of back in the blogging world before everyone was trying to be an influencer,
Yes,
kind
yeah.
of. Mm-hmm. And not to
You
like...
were an OG.
Yeah, not to like toot my own horn, but I was on pretty early. Mm-hmm. And I grew rather quickly. Before it was more common to have a lot of followers, I had a decent following. And I kind of capped out around like 12 or 13,000. And I've kind of like stayed in there. I have almost 16 now. So I haven't grown a lot, but I think part of it is just like I haven't given like a ton of care or effort to growing. Mm-hmm. I kind of just share what I share, and I don't know, I haven't made it the focus.
Yeah.
Do you feel like intent plays a large role in how you grow or how fast you grow? Like, does intention have to be pretty...
Yes and no. I mean, I haven't really made a big push to grow, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And even though I've kept a smaller following, I feel like I've still worked with some really big brands, and you don't have to have a huge following to do well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's cool about social media is almost any size of following you can be successful. And I do think intention does play into it, where I don't know, it just hasn't been my focus, and so I haven't even really tried or made an effort to, I guess, pull in a larger following. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's why I haven't grown.
I know that one of Caitlin's favorite things about you and why she wanted to have you on is because she feels like you're authentic. And I think that a lot of people, when they think about influencers, there is a tendency to think maybe they're not as authentic or it's just a show. Mm-hmm. I know that Caitlin, a big part of why she wanted you on is she feels like you're very authentic with the things that you post and with being a mom and what that's like in the gospel, things like that. What are your thoughts around authenticity in social media?
For me, I've always tried to stay authentic. Obviously, even with someone who's pretty open, I feel like you still aren't seeing everything. Mm-hmm. You know, we choose what we put out there and what we want to be seen. And I do try very hard to be authentic, but, you know, I have my days that are not picture perfect, where life is rough, and obviously I'm not going to focus on that. But I do try so hard to be authentic, and I think it's hard in this world where we want to make money, we want to be successful, we want to do all these things. And so as an influencer, sometimes it's hard to turn down brand deals or partnerships that pay well because it's not something you believe in, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't align. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been something that's been definitely hard, but I would feel so silly if I was sharing something that wasn't part of me or that I didn't agree with. And so for me, I just always try to share things I personally love, things I know I would buy or I already buy and use. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like it's a little more natural in sharing.
Yeah, because I was just looking at somebody's account and they were saying that a lot of the time with TikTok, it's hard when people look at it as like I'm posting, I don't know, to post almost, like instead of kind of just posting and people are just a part of your life and it feels more natural. And I think it's hard sometimes with social media, because I've even felt like that. I've had moments where I'm like, should I post on TikTok? Like maybe it could come of something or it would be fun to share my life. And then I've gotten in that mode where I'm like planning a post, which you can totally plan a post. I'm not saying that, but I think the people that are more open grow faster, but then it's also really scary because you're opening yourself up to so much criticism.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but like being openly, I don't know, Christian, even just believing in God, honestly. And then especially LDS, it can be nerve-wracking because I do feel like being LDS is, I don't know, looked down upon a little bit at times and very confusing to a lot of people. I don't know. And just a lot of judgment, I think.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
like, how have you been able to stay strong in what you believe and like still talk about it without getting too wrapped up into, I guess, just the hate? I don't know.
Yeah. I just try really hard to be honest. I'm probably a little bit of a minority where I take some of my like beliefs a little more seriously. And I don't mean that offensively to anyone. I just think it becomes really trendy to like be super immodest or just kind of bend your beliefs a little bit to gain a following or to be a little more popular, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it is hard sometimes because you want to, wear the cute, trendy outfit and you want to be part of like the cool group. But at the same time, I feel like I've seen so many blessings and just feel more peace and aligned with myself when I know I'm like not trying to portray something that's not me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just like being real about who I am and sharing the gospel in a little bit more of an indirect way. I think people can kind of see through like my day in the lives and what I do that Christ is a big part of my life. I never want to be like pushy about that, but I do want it to be known.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I feel like we feel similarly, where it's like, this is just what makes us happy and how we live. And it's not like we're pushing it on anyone, but I love that it's just more natural for you to do that. I mean, cause it's still scary, and it can be hard. And so I look up to you so much for that. Cause I've noticed that like when I followed you over the years and stuff, I do think that you stand out as a person being that way just because I don't know. It goes back to like modesty too for me, because sometimes I think people look at modesty like girls are almost like repressed in a way to not be able to wear, like you've been saying, what they want to wear, which I do think everyone should feel empowered and feel comfortable in all these things. And it really is, like Josh was saying, with garments and all of these things, it can be very personal. But I do think because it is more trendy to kind of, I don't know, just be a little bit more modest, like you had said, I think you stand out because, I don't know, you just, like you said, you work with brands that align with you. You're more modest that way. And I don't know, I just, I really admire that. I think that's really, really cool.
It is hard sometimes because I feel like from like an influencer standpoint and a business standpoint, sometimes you want to stay away from religion. You want to keep them separate because just mixing business with that sometimes isn't always the best thing. Yes. And so I think that's why I've kind of gone about just living my life the way I live it, but not always in people's faces about it. And I don't know, I thought it was interesting that you said I've stood out because I try not to stand out. I'm really? Like very shy. I try to like stay in my lane. But at the same time, I just think it's so important, especially in today's world where it's not popular to be religious or to be modest. And there is a community of people who do appreciate it, even though it's not popular.
Yep. See, and I think you maybe think that about yourself, but it's like almost like this quiet confidence that you have. And I think that you don't even like realize the effect that you could have on somebody or like what people are thinking when they meet you or talk to you or see your page and stuff. And I can just, ever since I met you, honestly, like you just have a light about you. And I think it's obviously you're just a good person and you care. And like, it was just cool when you were talking about when you met your husband too, like you noticed like in his eyes that he was just a good guy. Like you felt like there was something there, And I remember when I started to date Josh, I felt like that about him too. Like I remember even my sister had said something about Josh when she saw a picture of him. She was like, he looks like he has really kind eyes, and anyway. And so I think it's just so cool when it's almost like just the way that you live and you treat people can make such an impact, and you might not always know how that might affect somebody, I guess. So
I think it's an interesting thing to think about, like the balance between sharing something that's very personal to you and business. It's something that we've thought a lot about when it comes to this podcast. And I think that there have been times where I've probably pushed more of the LDS thing than Caitlin has expected. But I think that one of the things that I enjoy doing the most when it comes to my business on the pest control side is trying to get a feel for markets. And I think that we would honestly be really surprised by how much people appreciate having, I don't know, representation. I feel like there's so few positive, like outwardly expressing like LDS stuff and while still being normal. It's like I feel like there's like this slope where it's either there's passiveness, passive LDS, like representation.
Like a gray area sort of, or
and then really churchy stuff, like really churchy stuff. Us collectively, I think we're trying to find like that sweet spot. But I think that niche is a little bit bigger than what we probably expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you, Kelsi, how do you feel like you and your husband have been able to like keep God a large part of your marriage, and how has that affected like you and how you raise your kids and just as you know your relationship?
I think it's been interesting to navigate.
Yes, yeah.
Just because everyone grows up so differently, even in the church.
Totally.
And I don't know, I think the biggest thing for us is just always trusting in God. We've had so many like wild life changes that most of them have come unexpected. And my husband's a big planner.
Oh, okay.
I'm like a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually wouldn't think that. That's funny.
He is a planner. So it's been kind of cool to see both of us come together and just like, even some of them have been hard for me, even though I'm not a planner. And so I love that we can come together and just trust that there's a plan. God's got our back. It's all going to work out. And it's a hard thing to do, especially when you're like planning a family and trying to, you know, build a career and get into a home and just all the things that come with life. I think it honestly just comes down to trusting in God and knowing that we're always trying to do our best, always trying to be better than we were yesterday. And it doesn't mean we're perfect by any means. I feel like we've had a lot of, you know, even disagreements on how things should be or what we need to change.
We're definitely guilty of that.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I think everyone is. And it's something that's not talked about a lot, even in the church. But I just think we both want the same thing. We want to become more Christ-like. We want to raise our kids knowing God and knowing who they are.
Yeah.
And when you have the same goal, you kind of have to we're still learning this. You kind of just have to let go of outside things and come together and decide what you want to take from, you know, like what you've learned and how you each grew up and come together as your own family. And so I think for the last couple of years, it hasn't always been, you know, smooth going. And it's not like it's been horrible, but it's just like coming together and figuring out. So much
to navigate,
yeah, what you want for your own family. But I just think for us, the biggest thing is just trusting in God and knowing that we can always be better and it's all going to work out. I like tend to be very emotional about like life changes and everything. And my husband's just so logical. So, but having that similar belief, I think really helps.
Yeah. That's amazing. Actually me and Josh are kind of similar that way too. I would say I'm more of a planner though than you are, like more organized, but he's more logical for sure. And I'm more emotional. And I think it's really easy for me to get in my head and overthink everything. Like almost I've had to work really hard not thinking of like the worst case scenario or whatever, right? Like kind of what you said.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. And it's hard. Yeah. Especially when you have, like you said, a kid or kids involved. And you're like, are we making the right decision? Is this the path we're supposed to go on? You know, and because we've felt that way too with moving, you know, because we moved a few times now and with business and everything. And you kind of have to just, like you said, make the decision together and move forward with faith and trust, even though in the moment it feels really intense to do that, you know?
I don't know, making sure that when you said like when kids are involved, it's hard to... When you're a child, your perspective of your parents, you just think they know everything.
And they're going to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing all the right things. And then your perspective changes when you have your own kids. You're like, I feel so young and so incapable of doing this.
Yes, yeah.
And I remember having when we had my son, I thought, like, this is just not what I expected. I thought I would know more. I thought I would, like... have more figured out.
Yes.
But I think it's just so normal. Like we're just taking it as we go and
it's
having
such
faith,
a process.
Like you said.
Yes. I felt that similar way that you did. Like, and I was going to bring that up. I'm glad that you said that just because I do feel like that's another thing that's not really talked about where like, especially growing up in the church, it is kind of like not pushed on you, but it's just like families are a huge part of like our life and which is amazing. But I think it can sometimes be a lot of pressure too. Like once you become a mom, either like from your mom's example or just talking to other moms and you get this idea in your head that how, like you said, it's going to go. And I felt like that when I had my son, I was like, wow, why is this so hard? Like, why am I not like coming into this easier, I guess? Yeah. And I felt really like I was mad a little bit and like disappointed in myself.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know, I didn't grow up always wanting to be a mom, but it's almost like I knew I would do that and it would be amazing. So maybe that's why too. And once I finally did it, I was just really hard on myself. And it's hard because you're like, I have to make decisions for another person too. And it's not just my life anymore, but then it makes life so rich too, because I don't know, you're building something, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And you had kind of asked me about like transitioning into becoming a mom.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
It's just such an interesting transition. Like you said, it's so, you kind of think you know what it'll be like and you feel like you know what to expect, and then it's so different.
Yeah.
That is something that's also not talked about a lot. I feel like everything we're talking about is like not talked about enough.
Yeah.
But just like becoming a mom, it like rocks you. And I feel like it's sometimes looked down on to have a negative experience.
Definitely, yeah.
And having my first totally rocked me. Like, I have always wanted to be a mom. I had many years where I wasn't married and thought I should be married and like longed to be a mom.
Yes, yeah.
And then it was just like so not what I thought it was.
Yep.
But it's also like the best thing I've ever experienced.
Yep.
And I think like both can exist.
Totally.
But it's hard to talk about the hard parts without feeling like guilty as a mom.
Yep. And then also like so many people struggle with fertility, and that's just something that I haven't had to struggle with. And I thank God for that, because I can't even imagine how hard that would be. Mm-hmm. And so then, like you said, if all these other people's experiences, you're like, I don't want to hurt your feelings or not be grateful that I'm a mom, because I totally am. But like you said, there's still space to be like, actually, this is truly the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah. It's almost like you become this completely new version of yourself. I think any parent, even dads, could even feel this way. Like, and I'm sure Josh, you could talk about that, where you just, it's like your perspective changes. I feel like a butterfly caterpillar coming into my own sort of. And I don't know, like I'm so proud of myself, like all the layers kind of that I've been like shedding. But at the same time, it's, I don't know, it's just so difficult. And I think for me, the hardest was more like postpartum and trying to navigate my first child. And I feel like I'm in such a better spot now that Noah's a little bit older and like can do activities and go to school. And I feel like I'm getting a little bit more of my, I don't know, who I am back in a way. But it's a long process when they're young, and then you have two. So it's like,
I do think though, the second time around, it's so much more enjoyable.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I mean, the first time around, everything is so new. There's so much to take on that you've never done before. You have your routine as a couple, and then it completely changes when you bring in a baby.
Yep.
But the second time around, like, you kind of know what to do. Mm-hmm. You know what works for you. You know, like, the different roles you like to play in being a parent and bringing a new baby in. You know, like, what's helpful to each other. Yes. You're not, like, having needs unmet where you are scared to communicate them because it's something new.
Yeah,
that makes sense. You just, like, feel a little more on top of things, and you're like, I've done this before.
I can do it again. Yeah.
And it's just so fun. It's fun to see, like, your first baby with a new baby.
Yeah, I know.
That's nice.
I love seeing videos of, like, little siblings meeting each other.
I can share a little bit about my thoughts on the dad perspective.
Yeah.
For me, I think one of the most unexpected things that, like a realization that I had is that, like, the importance of being able to emotionally regulate myself has a lot to do with if I end up, like, just like when you think about, like, childhood trauma, a lot of that could be avoided if parents knew how to emotionally regulate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Or work through things.
Or work, like if they had worked through things or emotionally regulate. And I was not prepared for the overstimulation and not being able to get away from that. Because you can't, like, they depend on you and you love them. Mm-hmm. But I also agree. I think that although maybe it's looked down upon to have, like, a negative experience, I think that I have told Caitlin this, I think it's the sign of a healthy mind to be able to accept that there's dichotomies in life, that that two things can be true at once. It can be the most hard thing you've ever done, but it could also be the most fulfilling and happiest thing you've ever done. And that's how I feel about it. When Noah was born, I felt like the Grinch, where my heart just immediately grew outside of the box and like it popped open and my heart grew.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to explain it other than that. Like before you had a C-section, it wasn't like that. And then immediately after hearing him cry, my heart grew. It's not easy to understand until you are a parent, you know? And I feel like for me on a spiritual level, I feel like it's also really kind of informed my thoughts on how God must feel about us.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I ever could have really understood that until becoming a parent. And then just understanding that there's opposition in all things, like it makes sense that there would be opposition in the most important thing we're ever going to do in our lives, which is raise our families, you know? Overall, I feel like it's been the best thing that we've ever done, you know? I would also say that it's been in some ways like it can be spiritual and it can also not be spiritual. Like when we look for it, I feel like it's a very spiritual thing, but I also feel like it'd be very easy just to deal with what's right directly in front of us. Like our son not wanting to go to bed and getting up 15 times or busting through the child locks on the doors, which we had to go through three different child locks. And we finally found one he couldn't get through. But it's like, it also changes your perspective of your own parents in a lot of ways. It makes you wonder, is this how they felt about me? You know, not like the overstimulation part so much, but like, did they really love me as much as I love our son? You know, like, did they worry about me the same way? It's just, there's so much depth there that it's really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me like when you were talking about, we just did a previous episode about missions and how Josh had said just like his eyes were opened spiritually, like just a lot of things changed after he went, you know? And I feel the same way like you were saying about being a parent. We all can kind of agree that, I don't know, just like this lens almost, it becomes like your whole world. And I'm so proud of like the version of myself that I am today from everything I've had to go through. And you look back on it and you're like, I would never change it. But it's almost like same with a mission or hard things that we go through. Like I would never want to do maybe that toddler phase or whatever phase that was again. But it's like you wouldn't change it for the world because you have your kids. And so I'm curious, like, how's the balance? Obviously, it's probably imbalanced a little bit since your husband's gone, you know? Like, do you feel like resentful at all sometimes, or like, I don't know, I guess just what has been the hardest part about being like a military wife?
Honestly, like so it's almost been a year.
Yeah, it's almost been a year.
That we've lived apart.
Yeah.
And I would say honestly, like the first maybe 8 or 9 months were me just barely surviving, hanging by a thread. And it's so hard. It's like you said, like it can be the hardest thing you've ever done, but you're like so grateful to be there and you know it's the right path at the same time.
Yep.
And that's been something that's like a whole new life change and like dynamic to navigate like being married. Because when you're apart and you only get to talk once a week, like you really cherish those moments, but it's hard. Like it's so hard because most of my days are like a little bit frustrating and like overstimulated and like,
so, like a roller coaster,
yeah,
right?
And I'm being like stretched thin. And so when me and my husband talk, you know, he's like, how's your day going? And like for me, it's usually the same thing. I'm like, today was rough. Today was hard. You know, like nothing got done. And like I feel defeated a lot of days. But at the same time, like I'm doing the most important thing. And like,
totally.
While my husband's gone, like my kids need me even more than ever before.
True. Yeah.
And so like you just have to show up and you have to do it. And a lot of people are like, I don't know how you're doing this. Like I would have told my husband no. And I get that, but like this is so his calling and like I want to do my part. And definitely at the beginning, I feel like there were times where I could feel myself being a little resentful.
Yeah.
And just
which is
like,
understandable. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's just hard when, you know, when we talk, you know, he's got all these new accomplishments and he hit a PR and he's leading his team and he's, you know, getting one step closer to his goal. And I'm like, so I've cried 3 times today and I'm covered in poop and pee and food and the kids won't go to bed, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
But then I just know, you know, there's give and take. And there's been times like postpartum where he was probably so stretched thin trying to help me through it. So I just think you have to have like
the give and take.
Yes. Yeah. And like a bigger picture of like, it's not always going to be this way.
Yeah.
We're going to get through it. It's not forever. And this is just my turn to like step up a little more. And I sound like really positive talking about it right now. And it's taken me almost a year to get there. But it's definitely been like so many highs and lows of, you know, him trying to be as supportive of me as he can from far away and me the same to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's crazy, honestly. I mean, I think that's been one of the hardest parts for me, though, being married. Like you said, it's not always going to be 50-50, you know? And I think in your mind, when you get married, I don't know, it's easier to think like, oh, for sure. Like they're going to take care of this part. I'm going to take care of this part. We're going to be like equally yoked, all these things. But like you said, sometimes there's chapters where one person's like really struggling.
Yeah.
You know, like my dad just recently passed away, and like there's just, like you said, some things that unexpectedly will happen, or your husband chose that path, and maybe for sure when you guys got married, you weren't like, oh, he's for sure going to go into the army, right? And so you kind of like pivot and shift. And I think that's so cool that you've been able to see him like be happy in that decision, and it feels right. Even though it's so difficult, you've been able to be like, I'm okay to do this. It's not forever. I can support him and move forward. And like, it's so good to just have open communication. Cause I've had times where I'll be like, Josh, like since my dad died, I'm like, I'm not doing okay. Like this is, I've never felt these feelings, or I've never gone through this. And sometimes like, the other person in the partnership, the marriage has to like pick up the slack in certain areas, or, but it's heavy, you know, like you said, it's not always butterflies and rainbows. It's like
somebody once told us, it's not 50-50.
Yeah.
It's 100 and 100. So,
oh, interesting.
And it's interesting, but if every day you can show up willing to give 100%, you might not have 100% in you, but like, if you can show up wanting and willing to give that, when your partner doesn't have 100% to give, you're already at more than 100% as a couple. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. I just really resonated with that because it's so true. Like there's so many days, especially as a mom, that I show up and I'm like, I've given all of my energy and all of my percent to the kids. I've got like 20% left. And those are just the times and the seasons of life that you have to like be willing to give a little more of yourself. And even if you don't want to, sometimes your spouse just needs that, or your kids need that from you. And it's hard, but it's just like life.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that perspective.
I have a question. How has like the time apart affected like spirituality, like or like with like your kids, or like with your like the family dynamic? Because I'm going to be completely honest, I would probably have a hard time doing all those things if Caitlin wasn't there.
Yeah. No, it's really been difficult, to be honest. And there were a few times towards the beginning that I was like, did we make a mistake? Like, like, what are we doing? And just like you said, like, sometimes it is hard to not be resentful. Like, I totally chose this with him and supported him. But there were times that I was like, this is your fault. Like, you chose this career path. And I'm like, I'm over here suffering because you want to chase this dream. Mm-hmm. And then I have to like come back down to earth and like, okay, like.
Sometimes it's important to voice that though. Like it makes you feel better.
Totally. Yeah. And it's hard because you don't want to like come at them. But I think that's like a beautiful part about marriage, is that you can bring out like your deepest, most difficult, vulnerable feelings and still know that you're going to be loved and met with like compassion. And there's definitely been times where I've like, you know, come out with claws and been like, you know, I don't want to do this. And now that I've like had more time to think about it and pray about it, I know that this is where we're supposed to be. But it's hard. Like you said, like doing it all, taking on like all the responsibility at home is so hard on your own. But I think just knowing that it took me a while to realize like my husband's not having fun every day either. And for a while I was like, you're out here having fun, while I'm at home, like, you know, like crying every day.
Cleaning the dishes and
Yeah.
Yep.
But then there was a point where, you know, he's missed my daughter's birthday. He's missed like a lot of little milestones and holidays, and like our anniversary is at the end of this week. And he's gotten emotional over missing those things. And I went out to visit him in June, and I was like shocked. I was like, you are like really roughing it out here. Like, the apartment he's in is so crappy, so dirty, like nothing works, everything's broken.
Dang.
And it's just like humid and gross. And I'm like,
it's probably what my living conditions would be like without
probably.
Caitlin.
Like, if I was
the man
there,
cave. Yeah.
If the roles were reversed, I would be like, get me out of here. And I think I just had this realization of like, yes, he's working towards some goals, but like, this is not ideal for him either. He's in a crappy living situation. He's eating crappy cafeteria army food every day.
Oh, that's
it's
hard.
not like something he wants to be doing either.
Yeah.
And so like, this is just the part where like, we're both sucking it up to like get to where we want to be and be back in the same household. And like, as much as we don't want to do it, like when you don't have a choice, you kind of just figure it out. Like, some people have said to me, like I said earlier, like, why are you doing this? Like,
yeah,
like I would totally say no. But I think part of our covenants and being married and being sealed, part of our covenants to each other and with God is that we will do those things. And when it sucks and when you want to give up, like, you'll get up the next day and do it again. And you'll keep showing up for each other. Like, I want him to know he can count on me. I didn't know I would get emotional. But it's definitely changed, and it's been hard for my kids. It's definitely been a transition for them. But whenever I talk about him and his job to my kids, I try to always keep it positive.
Oh,
because
that's nice.
It's not their fault that it's like sucky. It's not their fault that some days I don't have 100% to give them. And I just want them to know that even though it's hard, like, we can look at the positive parts. We can have faith in God. We can show up, and it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's been easy. It's definitely been a change. I don't know if that even answered your question, but
yeah,
it's a different lifestyle. But I think to anything like, you know, doctors and medical school and even your job, there are such high pros and cons, and you just figure it out. You figure out what works for you, and you have faith and you get through it.
Yep.
Do you feel like you can relate to any of those feelings, Kate?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I'm super proud of you, though, because I think, like you said, both situations are really hard, and they're not even comparable in a way, just because they're so different. But I think it's really cool of you to have that perspective and think, like, oh, wow, he's actually probably having a hard time because he'd rather be with us too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's been hard for me with Josh sometimes, because I think it's easy to look at working full time as a lot more fun than being a stay-at-home mom, you know? But I know there's times where Josh has so much stress on him. Just starting a business by yourself from the ground up alone is like a huge, huge milestone, you know? And I've always been so proud of him, but I think there's times where I'm like, you get to go to lunch, you know, and you get to like talk to adults, and you get praised for certain things. Like you said, with your, you know, with your husband's and being in the Army, I'm sure he gets these, like, I don't know, awards or whatever. He moves up, and you're like, I'm not getting an award today. Yeah. I'm giving myself one, you know, or whatever. But so that's something I do feel like after hearing you say that, like, I want to continuously work on. And I think it can go both ways, though. Like, and Josh is really good at kind of praising me too, especially when he takes turns. Like, when I just went on a girls' trip, he was with Noah, you know, and he's like, oh, like, I feel like he was, like you said, in survival mode, you know. Sometimes,
100%.
like,
I was in survival mode. Like, we did not go to church. We were just like hunkered down.
Yeah. It's just like it's so different when you play different roles, and when you're like the default go-to parent. Yeah. It's hard to not be resentful, and it's hard to not get in that rut of like, you're having so much fun and I'm just over here. And it's like you said, like before, it can be so spiritual if you make it that way. And it's hard when you are in the thick of things to
see it that way.
Focus on the spiritual. Yeah. But I mean, if you were at work every day, you would wish you were home every day.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to go to work every day. And so I'm so grateful I can be at home.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you don't need a break. And it doesn't mean that that's not valid.
Totally.
It's just like difficult to navigate.
Yep. It's like you go through so many feelings, like you said, because I know so many moms that I've talked to too. It's like, I don't want to work. I want to work, but I don't want to be away from my kids. But I'm so grateful to be at home. But I need to go get a massage. And like, you know what I mean? You're like, just
yeah. And like even dads, like dads who go to work every day. I mean, I know that many of them are happy to do it and they're doing what they need to do to provide for their family, but they miss so much and they're sad about it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember that. Like as a wife, it's hard to be like, dang, he's missing this and he's sad about it. Like sometimes I'm like, he's just living life, having fun. Like he doesn't miss us. And I'm like, no, he totally does. And it's just sacrifices you both have to make.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep. And like you said, not one like partnership or marriage or situation is ever going to be easy or perfect. Like it's just like what you're doing at the time, give and take. Like, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts, Josh, about what we've been talking about?
Kind of. It's peripheral to it.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
I just had like a funny thought. I did want to ask your opinions on the secret lives of Mormon wives.
Comes out soon.
Knew when you like emailed me, I was like, I wonder if they're gonna ask about this.
It's just been swirling around, and so it's kind of just like in our minds, you know.
So my question about it is, do you feel like you were raised to serve all the desires of your husband and do everything at his beck and call?
No. And I was taken back by that comment in the trailer. And I do think like I don't know, I'm sure the producers are like having a heyday with this.
Mm-hmm. With the background music Unholy by Sam Smith.
Oh my gosh. I know.
It was such a vibe though. It just is so funny to me. I don't know. I feel like I get what people have been saying online where they say they feel maybe active members feel misrepresented, you know, and that it is like really intense on the one side of like, I just think that narrative is really, I don't know, talked about so much lately, like women are repressed or oppressed,
and
whatever.
I don't know why it's like so trendy. I don't know, like our church is just attacked in such a different way than any other religion. And it's so interesting to me because we're choosing this lifestyle.
It's not a cult, guys.
Yeah. Like we're not forced into it. If you don't want to be part of it, you don't have to be.
You literally,
And I think some people think like, I do want to be part of it, but I feel like I have to, you know, do everything my husband says and come to his every beck and call. But it's like, yes, we are taught that when you get married, you're one and you do submit to your husband, but it's not in that way. It's not.
I've never seen it be that way.
Ever. Never.
I mean, I didn't see my grandma do it. I didn't see my mom do it. I haven't seen my wife do it. Maybe in like a joking way, life would be easier sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't really mean that. I don't really mean that. But
I think people take that and they twist it. Mm-hmm. Where like, I think what is meant to be taught is like, you come together and you're one with the Lord, and like submitting to your husband isn't necessarily do everything he says and wants. It's, I don't know. Like, do you get what I'm trying to say? Like,
yes.
Like you do submit in a way that like, you know, he is the leader of the home.
You have specific roles. Yeah.
Yeah. You have roles, but it doesn't mean you don't have a say and you don't have agency and you aren't a singular person too.
Well, like, look what your situation is right now. I'm just saying, like, okay, say someone's the breadwinner. Maybe you would say in the LDS church, it's more prevalent for the male to kind of be the patriarch of the home, the breadwinner, all these things. But that's like continuously changing. And I don't think that every single woman wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, that's
Do I
totally
think
fine.
that like mothers have more of a maternal aspect, and I do think kids need a mother, but they also need a father, and they need both. And I was just talking about this with my mom, how like a lot of the kids TV shows like paint the picture of the dad being like, I don't know, just lame or can't handle things, or I just feel like males are so attacked right now too, in a way where I like, I think she was saying Bluey is like one of the only shows where like the dad's, you know, in a good
Yeah.
light. Just an example. I've been thinking about that. And we all deal with things though, male and female, that are hard, you know, that we, I don't know, wish wouldn't be that way, I guess. But I don't know. I think we can find good in whatever your dynamic looks like, I guess. And you have to figure that out in your own marriage too. Like, it's not black and white always.
Yeah.
So
I feel like for me, my my observation, if like I look back over my life, I really haven't seen that. Like, wives submit to their husbands. If anything, I think that relationship dynamics and personality has significantly more to do with it than anything else. Like, it's not like in church on Sundays, they're telling everybody in the Relief Society to submit to their husbands. It's not like that at all, you know? And even though I don't sit in Relief Society, I feel like I can say that that's the truth. I feel like I've seen a lot of relationships where the woman wears the pants, like 100%. And that's not something that's punished or looked down upon. It's just like, if it's a cult, it would be punished if there wasn't adherence to the standard. And like, it's just not like that. It's not like that here.
And I think even traditionally, like our grandparents, it was a little more that way. And it wasn't even a church thing. That was just culturally.
It was.
Yes.
In America.
Yes.
The man leads the family and the wife and the kids follow.
Generationally too,
Yes,
right?
It had nothing to do with like religion.
Yes.
And so I think now we're coming more to like, oh, women can work full time if they want, and women can not be at home if they don't want to. And I don't know why in the media it's always twisted.
Yeah.
I think just, you know, Satan wants to attack the family. They want to attack our like God-given like roles. Like, women are more nurturing, and that's just our divine role.
The way that God wanted it to be,
can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a special gift that we're given.
Yes, I totally agree with
I definitely don't have that gift. So,
Well, yeah,
100%,
we all
it
have
is-
like
it is
divine
divinely
characteristics, like Josh was saying, but also we're all our own people and we all have our own personalities and our own marriages. I mean, I do want to speak on though, because I have been seeing a lot of TikToks about this where like people talk about how a lot of people are focusing on a lot of these girls like in the show aren't maybe active LDS, right? And maybe a lot of them like were baptized, but they're not like living everything, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I guess, what are your thoughts, Kelsi and Josh, about like, I guess just being like less judgmental and thinking that those women still could be LDS. I don't know for sure if they all are. That doesn't mean that like just because they're not living every standard, we have to like hate on them, sort of. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, so I actually know several of them.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
And there are a few of them who are active members.
Okay, yeah. See, I didn't know. Yeah.
And there's some who I think aren't members at all and who maybe were members at one point.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is just like the public reaction, which I get it. Like, I'll be honest, when I first saw the name and like the trailer, I was just like, wow. Like,
It's just intense.
like I kind of can't believe this for a minute. And
Yeah.
just like, when you are a member who's trying so hard to just do everything you can to follow the commandments as closely as you can. Nobody's perfect.
Just striving. Yeah.
I've totally made major mistakes. But I think when you initially see that, it's like a little bit offensive because you're like, this is really not what we believe. It's just not true.
Yep.
But I do think that everybody has a story to tell. We've all made mistakes. I mean, these girls are girls who are our neighbors. They're
totally
sitting in sacrament with us.
Yeah.
You know? And there are so many people who aren't going to be on TV who have similar stories.
True. Yeah.
I think just where the line is making it seem like some of the things are taught and practiced in our church that aren't.
Yes. Yeah.
And so even though it's so hard, we need to try harder to be accepting because that's what we're taught. Like, what we're taught is that you can come if you're not perfect. You can come as you are. We've all made mistakes. We've all been at really low points, and that's okay. And you can come and be close to God and like learn about him and do your best.
Yes.
But I just think it's sometimes how it's portrayed that gets a little misread, especially for like non-members. I think that's something that a lot of members are
Stressed
upset
about, or,
is we don't want to seem like this is the norm and something that the church is okay with.
Yes.
And like,
yep.
You know,
just using that name, it's like going to be affiliated.
Yeah.
But honestly, I also feel like it does damage also with the church, like having to feel the need to protect themselves and say, this isn't us. Because like you said, it comes across judgmental.
Yeah.
And I feel, or it can come across judgmental. I feel like I understand both sides of it. I don't have a problem with people that are doing their best and don't live to every single standard. It's not my place to judge. But do I want to be represented by that person? Probably not.
Really. Yeah.
Probably not, because it's not an accurate representation of my beliefs. And that doesn't mean that I dislike them personally.
Yeah.
Because I don't know them. They're probably really nice people. I have a lot of thoughts on it. Some of them might not be super popular, but I just think that like apathy and just like not being kind of more lukewarm with the gospel is something that I feel like was more normal when I was a teenager. And then I don't know, I just don't think it's as like I don't understand the cultural draw to it right now. I feel like people are like the cultural strings are being pulling people towards apathy, you know, like it's not that big of a deal. You can kind of choose what you want to do, what you don't want to do.
Or just a gray area, like it's up in the air.
It's gray area. It's up in the air, and you can still rubber stamp yourself and say you're LDS, which technically you can. You don't have to be perfect. And so for me, it has a lot more to do with intent. And who am I to judge intent? I can't judge what somebody's intent is, but I still think that intent matters. So if somebody's intention is to be apathetic and they don't really care, and they're just using it as a marketing ploy to elevate themselves, even though it could do damage to the brand of the church and to members, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
If it's not their intent and they're really just trying their best and, you know, they fall short like every single one of us does, I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, intent has a lot more to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like, I know there are a couple girls on the cast who were pretty upset with the name.
Yeah.
And how things played out, because they were told when they were cast that this is not going to be religion focused. And I actually don't think the show will be. I think just
it was like clickbait, right? A little bit. Yeah.
It
the name's
needed
a hook.
to play a part so that people will watch. So it's interesting. So it's like a little bit controversial. And I think it's just, I don't know, like you said, it's hard when the church makes a statement. But I think with all these shows coming out and the popularity of like being like a risque member, they kind of have to be like, just so you know, like, we're not teaching this.
Yeah, and it makes sense to me, like you said, why that had to come out. I think they'll be good and bad, honestly, overall. Like, I do want to be the kind of member that people feel like just the signs that are in all of our churches, it's like everyone's welcome, you know, where like, yeah, I think we can learn from this too, is what I'm saying. Like, we can just continuously be open and loving. And it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter thing for you to say that you believe in God and the atonement and the beliefs that we believe. Like, if you're not living every single thing, you can't say that you're LDS, which I think that they totally can. But it doesn't represent like every single person, and that's fine. You know?
And I do think like the public's reaction is sometimes the way people are turned off and leave, because
true.
You know, when we're judgmental and rude about someone just being human,
they're like, this is gross or whatever.
Like,
I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
True. So everybody needs to be nice and careful.
Yeah.
But
and
it will
I guess
be entertaining.
We'll just see what they actually cover on there. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe they probably really do have some cool stories to tell, which I'm sure it'll be interesting, you know? So just have to see when it comes out. I thought it was really fun to have you on and just chat.
It was fun to be on.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We just are proud, like, to have someone like you who's open to talking about their beliefs, and just proud of you for all that you're doing, like within your own family. And yeah, it was just so fun to talk to you and so good to see you.
I just think that your story is super cool. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to hold everything down for a year and not necessarily have an end in sight anytime soon. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. To be candid with you, I'd probably go inactive. And Like,
I was gonna say that Kelsi's always posting like her videos going to church, and I'm like, what a boss.
Like, I would still spiritually feel like very active, but dude, I would have, it's like World War III trying to get a toddler to sit in a freaking pew and not move.
No, well, I feel like even talking about it now, you're always so much more positive when people are asking you about it, and it's been a journey, but I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's a wild adventure.
And maybe later on too, we can have you on the podcast again, even if you end up moving, and we can see, where you're at.
How it's going.
And then we can look back on this and be like, look at all of the stuff you went through and what you did, so awesome.
Yeah.
But
thank you.
Thanks again, Kelsi, for coming on.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the zoo.